to hear you going full Stephen McLaren on the pronunciation of Arne Slot. Just trying to make him feel a little bit more relaxed. It's a good technique. Look, in terms of what he's achieved this season, obviously it's beyond what anybody expected. Why do you think he's been able to make this transition so smooth?
There was obviously a lot of noise outside the club. You know, a figure as big as Jurgen Klopp moves on. He's a different type of character. He hasn't tried to impersonate Jurgen Klopp in any way. I think it was really telling at the end of the West Ham game. And towards, you know, just before the final whistle, it almost felt like you were watching Klopp in some ways on the side of the pitch. I've never really seen that before. And even at the end of the game, he went onto the pitch and gave a little fist pump to the Kop. Not quite
not the full three,
no. But it was telling that I think he felt, as I mentioned in the interview, it'd been a tough week for him because he's not used to losing. Certainly Premier League games. So it was only the second game I think Liverpool lost all season. And there's been a calmness about him and the club. There's been a lot of noise outside with the contracts, but don't forget he didn't bring players in. He assessed the squad. He was quite calm about the fact that he didn't need to sort of buy anybody. I mean, when does that ever really happen? A new manager comes in, there's always talk of, oh, he's going to bring 2 or 3 players from his old club. Or, you know, the division that he's been in, the Eredivisie. But that didn't happen. And that's one of the things I do like, not just about Slot, but actually the club right now. There is a sort of... It's quiet. It's not. There's a lot of turmoil around other bigger clubs about managers and players coming in left, right, and centre. But as Liverpool, it always just feels like they're in control. They're not going to be swayed even by their own supporters at all. And but I still do believe that there is a big job to be done in the summer. And I think having assessed the team over the last 12 months, even though they're going to win the league, I do think that's when he'll put his real imprint on this team next season.
He seemed very calm, didn't he? What was his personality like, sort of away from being on a touchline, you know, every day? I know you're talking tactics and all that, but what was he actually like as a person?
I mean, he's a really... Listen, I've only probably met him 4 or 5 times, but a really sort of normal type of guy. There's no sort of... It's not like Klopp, the big personality. He just seems obsessed with football. And I had a manager in Rafa Benitez who had sort of an obsession with football. Every time you spoke to him, it was about football. He never spoke about anything outside. And he gives me that impression, whereas I think Rafa was more... The football's about stopping the opposition, where I think this guy's about, like, how can we hurt the opposition, how can we get on the ball? I mean, we talk about Liverpool and what type of champions they're going to be. In the 32 Premier League games this season, in 28 of them, they've scored 2 or more goals. So they always create chances, they always score goals, and that's been the big difference between themselves and Arsenal, because defensively there's nothing, you know, to choose between the two teams, but they're far better going forward.
He's still a relatively young manager. In fact, he played against Virgil van Dijk in the Eredivisie. And in terms of what he does next, though, is he already, as a manager, Roy, planning for next season and looking at that squad that
I would have
Jamie
thought
was
so.
saying?
Oh, you'd obviously be delighted with his season's gone, but you can't believe they're going to be obviously champions with a few games to go. But he'll have to be critical of the squad and start looking where they can improve. Obviously, great news for Liverpool with the players staying on, the big players. Big boost for everybody, but he'll certainly be looking at recruitment in the summer where they can get stronger. Again, we were talking earlier, they'll want to be back in the mix for the Champions League and get into quarters and semi-finals. That's what Liverpool expect. The key now for Liverpool, can they kick on and win the title again? That's where you try and become a great team, where you win it back-to-back or 3 or 4 times like Man City have done. So they're all the challenges. Yeah, you pat yourselves on the back and enjoy the summer and say you've won the league, but he'll certainly be looking with his staff in terms of recruitment and how can they be stronger next year, because you'd fully expect all the other teams to improve, and that will be the challenge for Liverpool now, get back-to-back titles.